above the hemline of her skirt, she's good. If we were caught to be in violation of the fingertip rule, we would be sent to have detention or in-school suspension. But to me, this just seemed like a step back in time. I agree that there should be somewhat an appropriate length for skirts in school, but the infamous fingertip rule just defamed the iconic miniskirt. In the 1950s, fashion was much more conservative, and by conservative, I mean way more constricting. Hemlines were much longer and perhaps too long. Style in the 1950s was considered to be mature and glamorous, and women were expected to dress this way all the time, especially around their husbands. This actually seemed like a step back in time for them because in the previous decade, in the 1940s, they seemed like they had much more freedom during World War II. They were encouraged to go out in the workforce, and this allowed them to dress more freely and less feminine. But now in the 1950s, there was this odd importance of becoming the ideal housewife, and they were expected to act and dress like one too. But the younger generation was sick of this, and they wanted to become their own and break through the traditional social boundaries. They did this through the help of rock and roll. The birth of rock and roll inspired rebellion and delinquency. But rebellion and delinquency was not the only thing that inspired women's fashion. Another thing was the political attitudes of the time. The political attitudes of love and peace against war and the newly feminist attitudes also inspired women's fashion to become more liberating. The 1960s fashion was the first decade that was drastically different from all of the other decades. Skirts were much shorter, bras were seen not as a necessity, and women were more liberating. Women's fashion was greatly influenced by the women's liberation movement, and the invention of the iconic miniskirt is a symbolic role of feminism and women's liberation. The invention of the miniskirt is credited to many designers, but there is always one famous designer that it comes back to, and that is London-based designer Mary Quant. When Mary Quant designed the miniskirt, she not only raised hemlines, but she raised eyebrows. The older generation was shocked that such young women were wearing, as they called it, provocative styles. But the miniskirt was the defining moment which helped shift the 1950s conservative style to the 1960s liberating style. It is ironic that something so mini had such a large impact. In support of miniskirts, there was a group called the British Society for the Protection of Miniskirts, and they protested outside events like Dior's fashion show, who failed to present the miniskirt during their runway. Today, miniskirts are the most popular type of skirt worn. And sometimes it is so commonly seen that sometimes people forget to make the connection of how important it is and how it still serves as a symbol of women's liberation and feminism. But since politics are so divided today, there is still very much different opinions from conservatives and liberals on what they think is appropriate for women to wear. The women's rights movement is very much relevant in today's society. And this is because a lot of women feel like our country is going back in time. Feminists today have similar ideals of those in the 1960s and the 1970s, that women should wear whatever they want, wherever they want, as it should be. But women are still judged greatly for what they wear today. An example of this is in school dress codes. For example, if a girl shows her collarbone, sometimes she can get in trouble for it because she might be, as they say, distracting to her male peers. Or a bigger example is the length of her skirt. Again, sometimes lengths of skirt give women stereotypical labels. For example, if her skirt is too short, she might be said that she's asking for attention. Or if her skirt is too long, she can be considered to be old-fashioned. Today we have come a long way from the conservative fashion styles of the 1950s, and we are much more like the liberating styles of those in the 1960s, although there are some conservative values emerging. Fashion is a never-ending cycle, and it is a very popular art that will always reflect the societal attitudes and values of that time.